Hello and welcome. My guest today is Kim Lisa Taylor, the founder of Syndication Attorneys, a nationwide practice dedicated to helping real estate entrepreneurs legally raise capital for commercial projects. Kim is not your typical lawyer. She's a former geologist who built a transactional powerhouse that operates entirely virtually with a loyal remote team across the country. In this episode, we are diving into why she walked away from a career in litigation to build a vagabond lifestyle practice and the marketing shift she's making from a long form podcasting to high impact YouTube shorts. We will also talk about her A-list client protocol and why she deliberately excludes Florida from her advertising campaigns. Kim, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Well, Alex, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, I want to start with your earlier career because law wasn't the first thing you pursued. You started as a geologist and then made the shift. Do you want to explain why you decided to take the step?
Sure. I had a great profession. I was an environmental consultant, worked with a lot of engineers, and I just kind of looked into my future and said, where would I go with this? Where will I end up? And decided that I didn't really like that trajectory. The trajectory was to run an environmental consulting branch office, and I just decided I would try a different course. I didn't particularly enjoy having engineers supervising me. They were great at what they did, but they thought they were great at everything. And so I had a few challenges. They thought they were great at the things we knew as geologists. So I said, well, maybe I can leapfrog over them and I'll go to law school and then I'll hire them to work for me. And that was kind of my self serving trajectory, I guess.
Was there any specific aha moments when you made the switch that reinforced that you made the right decision for yourself once you started to pursue that?
When I first went to law school, there was kind of an introductory day where you just got a taste of a few different classes. And I remember coming home and telling my husband, wild horses couldn't drag me away. This is where I belong.
And what was your initial making that switch when you went into litigation first? What was it, in terms of the different, what did you like, what you didn't like early on?
Yeah, so my natural course would have been to become an environmental attorney. And I happened to meet somebody who was doing homeowner association litigation, and I provided some support work for her as I was transitioning out of the environmental consulting world. And I just realized that, I wasn't really cut out for that kind of a lifestyle. It's kind of fun to write a nasty letter to somebody, but it's not fun to get one. So, you ended up, I felt like I was working with a lot of angry people all the time.
Mm.
Clients were angry about whatever situation they were in, and then they were always angry if you didn't win everything for them, which sometimes wasn't winnable. And then you were dealing with opposing counsel who was never nice. And I just thought, oh, I don't want to be, in a world where I just have to be in that kind of conflict all day long. And I really didn't enjoy going to court. Well, there were a lot of deadlines, and there was all these protocols and rules you had to follow, and it was just a little too constricting for the way I wanted to practice. So I kind of navigated into a transactional practice instead.
For the young attorneys, do you think that selection is something they can do at the beginning of their career, or is it something you need to experience for yourself to see if you like it or if it's not a good fit for you personally?
Well, if you've had prior experience to a law practice, so you have a family law practice or other people in your family that have been lawyers, then you may have a better sense of that when you enter law school. I didn't. My natural place to go would have been into environmental law because that was what I knew as a geologist. And I tried that for a while. And it too was litigation. But then I quickly realized that those cases go on for years and years and years and years. You have to work with the same people over and over. I remember standing in front of a room full of it was just a huge conference table just full of boxes, and I was supposed to go through all of them and find the smoking gun. I just thought, oh my gosh, this seems like such tedium to me. And then I had an older attorney that I knew who was an environmental lawyer, and he said, yeah, I've got this case that's gone on for 15 years. And I just thought, oh my gosh, okay, I don't think this is what I want to do. But
Right.
yeah. That was kind of my transition out, is realizing that
Mm.
that wasn't the right place for me. I needed to go somewhere else. So I think that those dawning moments come to others, either through law school, you take a class that you just absolutely love, or maybe you get out, you try some internships, and I actually didn't go the internship route because I was working full time while I was going to law school. So I was working during the
Hmm.
day and I was going to law school in the evenings. And so what I ended up doing was, when I got out, I didn't have pressure to go get a full time job right away. As I still had one. So I
Hmm.
started just working part time as a contract attorney for other attorneys. And I found out that there were a lot of solo practitioners out there who were eager to have someone come and help them for nominal amount. They didn't have to pay very much, and kind of on the job training for me, so I could go in just as they needed me. They don't have a big case, all of a sudden they need someone to help through all these discovery requests or something like that, or sit in on a deposition. Then they didn't need to pay a full-time salary for somebody or benefits or anything like that. They could just pay me an hourly rate. And I learned that the hourly rate was really about twice as much as I would have been paid as an employee. But I
Mm.
also got to pick and choose who I worked for, and which cases I would take on, just based on my other workload. So I got exposed to multiple law firms in that way. And I found some that were like, well, hey, I've got a half-time job for you, or this other one, I'll have job work for you periodically. And that helped me get exposed to different areas of the law that I wouldn't have
Mm.
otherwise had if I'd just gone and gotten hired by one firm.
I think it's very helpful to have that exposure because it helps you to identify what you like, what you don't like, and it's interesting how it worked out. And it sounds like you were quite intentional about the lifestyle you wanted to build around the practice as well. Just earlier, you mentioned that you've been traveling a lot, and that's the big part of how you work. Do you want to talk a little bit about that aspect of how you built your practice?
Well, I kind of lucked into it because I ultimately chose an area that was a federal practice area. And that is really truly the thing that has allowed me, because I wasn't doing litigation. I didn't have to show up in court. I didn't have these deadlines. And of course, a lot of that's changed now with, COVID, and the fact that a lot of even the court, you don't necessarily have to make an in-person appearance. But at the time I was doing it, that wasn't the case. So you did have to be live in person. But what happened is, my husband and I were looking at investing in real estate. So we went to a real estate training program, and there they were talking about, how to legally raise, they were talking about how to buy multifamily properties larger, 100 units plus. And then of course explained that, well, if you're going to do that, you're going to have access to money. And so, here's how people do that. And they, kind of introduced us to the concept of syndication. They had a further class that we could take on raising capital. They called it a private money boot camp. So
Hmm.
I was a pretty new attorney at the time. And I said, well, if we're going to do this, then we better learn how to do it correctly. So we went to that. And then I met the trainer that was teaching that. He was a securities attorney who was doing transactional work. And I introduced myself to him and said, I do contract work for other attorneys. I'd like to help you out if you ever have a need. And we ended up working together for a few years and then starting our own firm. And
Mm.
so for me, that having that ability just to kind of use the contract attorney services to be able to hire out to different types of practitioners was just what gave me the exposure and helped me find the ultimate area that I wanted to practice in.
And you carried the same in the way how you build your practice. So you had that experience personally, and you continued to grow in your firm in the same way by utilizing the remotes and being paperless before it became the trend.
Yeah, absolutely. That was I met him in 2007, and we started working together in 2008. And it turned out we lived 75 miles apart from each other at the time. So we just kind of met at a restaurant and exchanged documents, set up some systems so that we could communicate by email and share documents and things like that. And then kind of built the firm from there as a remote practice firm. Eventually, I met a paralegal who had worked for a large securities law firm, and she'd been out of the workforce for a while, raising her family. And she said, "Oh, well, how would I get back into the field?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, maybe you can work for us." And she was in Michigan. So I was in California. My partner was in California. We hired somebody in Michigan. And that really was what began the practice, the virtual practice. And paperless, because it doesn't help me to share information with a paralegal or my partner if I have papers sitting on my desk. It really had to be in a cloud-based system that all of us could access.
It definitely gives more flexibility in terms of access to team members and just the convenience when you travel as well. But have you identified any downside to being paperless and being remote? Has there ever been a situation where you thought that it might be good to have one office or only the upside all the
Never,
way?
never, never. I've had people that have wanted to meet with me, and so because of the fact that I've developed this kind of nationwide practice. Before COVID, we were just doing phone calls with potential clients and talking to people on the phone and then exchanging emails. During COVID, we decided, okay, it's time to actually get our faces out there, one way or another. And also, I went to a lot of events. So I went to a lot of real estate training events around the country. So I did get FaceTime with potential clients and actually met a lot of our current clients that way. Is we'd been working with them for a year or two, and all of a sudden I get to meet them face to face somewhere. So I think it did help to go to those live events just to have that live connection. But then Zoom kind of changed things. Having the access to the live, face to face, it feels a lot more connected
Hmm.
than just a voice on the phone. So I think that was what really helped us a lot, is just getting those face to face connections however we could.
Mm.
And I did go to local events for a while, but that really wasn't my audience, because the audience that I was tapping into were these people who are going to these nationwide training events and learning how to buy properties in every state and how to raise capital from people in every state. So really had to evolve our federal practice, and really have just never done anything on the state level that would require me to stay put in
Hmm.
one place. The papers I have on the phone, it's actually, or on my desk, it's actually a detriment to me to have paper on my desk, because I find I write things on them, and then half of it is just scribbling gibberish, and there's one or two things in there that are important, and I'm afraid to throw it away. So it's better for me just
Mm.
not to have it at all, and make sure that whatever I do write down, I put in a note or something that I can access again.
Mm.
Or having the right systems in place, the right software is absolutely key.
On the subject of the right system, I think with the way you implemented being paperless for the convenience of the team was very intentional. Do you think now with AI making it so easy to generate documents, there are a lot of unnecessary things being produced in terms of the documents, and whether it's internal memos or anything else in the law firm, or you don't think that's a
Well,
concern?
that's interesting. I think that clients are creating a lot of unnecessary work for attorneys, and probably driving up their legal fees without knowing it, just by using their own attempt to do their own legal analysis. And I just recently went to a continuing legal education for a couple of days with a lot of other securities attorneys, and we all shared the same sentiment that in a lot of cases, everything we generate, our clients will come back with, but AI said do this and that, and now we have to respond to it. So we actually had to amend our fee agreement to say whatever we respond to, whatever AI questions you ask us that we respond to, we charge hourly for. So all of a sudden, your lump sum billing gets some add-ons that probably weren't necessary, and it was really just you second guessing what the attorney was saying to you. But the biggest problem is that the clients aren't asking the right questions. They don't
Hmm.
understand how to frame the question or how to ask, and they put in enough information to make the answer relevant. And very often it just takes you off in the wrong direction. And also, I've learned that if I really want a true answer, I have to narrow my responses, and just say, hey, I don't want you AI to look at any information from any other law firms. I only want you to look at the law.
Mm.
And the reason I said that is because I've gotten so many wrong answers that I knew were wrong. And then I would challenge AI. Well, where did this come from? Why did you insert this provision? That's not part of the law. Where did this, and then, and then I have to go back and forth with AI until it finally admits, oh, yeah, okay, that's not a requirement, and takes it out. So if I'm having to do that as an attorney that just happens to already know the
Mm.
answer, and I'm just kind of confirming what I already know. A client that goes out there and asks the question wrong is going to get a completely wrong answer. You're very likely to get a completely wrong answer or get driven in the wrong direction. So, clients need to hire attorneys that they trust and then trust the attorneys to do their job and to do the critical thinking and analysis that's required
Mhm.
to make sure they're getting the right information. So, yes, I had one client that I had 11 memos for. And that's after I wrote that, I said, Mar, anytime we do that from now on, it's an hourly billing. So if you want me to respond to all these things, happy to do so. A lot of it's going to be, here's why you're wrong, and
Mhm.
trying to say it in a gentle and tactful way. Clients have to be mindful of the fact that their attorney student might know what they're doing.
Certainly. I think what you said about knowing the right questions to ask is an absolutely golden nugget because whether it's law or any other knowledge-based industry, that's the problem. On the wrong assumptions, if you don't know the questions to ask, you just get wrong information. And I like your take on being upfront that it's going to cost you extra if you want us to answer all the other possibilities that are not the right question to ask or goes on the wrong assumption. There is definitely a sentiment that will AI take away, law jobs, and it's actually the opposite. I think we will have to do a lot of untangling for clients in terms of what they get wrong, and if anything, that will generate more work for the attorneys that actually know what they're doing.
I think that it may jeopardize some paralegal jobs, but I think the people
Mm.
that are really at jeopardy of losing the jobs are the people that refuse to adopt AI. And it was very interesting at that continuing legal education. One of the speakers on a panel was the Chief Justice from the Delaware corporate, the court,
Hmm.
and he was saying, yes, we use AI. We use AI to summarize the facts of a case and to summarize the arguments. And then, and when we're formulating our decisions. And, this wasn't a young guy
Hmm.
who had realized the value and embraced how beneficial it can be when used in the right way. And he said, no, we're not using it to make decisions, but we are using it to gather information on which we can base
Hmm.
rational decisions. And when there's so much information out there, I think the AI is really good at that. It's really good at condensing that information down into manageable chunks that you can use to make decisions. So I think it's the people that aren't using AI that are at risk of losing their jobs, and the people that are willing to embrace it, adopt it, realize how it can. If nothing else, for me, it's been a big confidence booster because
Hmm.
things I learned from a mentor all those years ago, I can say, but wait a minute, is that really how it is? Or is that correct? Is that right? And, if it's confirmed, then it's like, okay, we keep doing things the way we've been. But sometimes it's like, well, no, maybe you should be doing things a little bit differently, and it helps steer our course a little bit to be able to provide a better product for our clients.
That's interesting. I think a lot of that also comes to the trends. And when clients or sometimes attorneys as well research something on AI, they want to see patterns and they want to look trends. And specifically, given the work that you do, I'm curious, do you sense there is seasonality to your work with, how the clients respond to the market conditions, if there are any other trends that you notice and maybe how it impacts your practice?
Definitely, there's some trends. We're seeing actually a shift in how our clients are doing business. So, we're a corporate securities law firm. We draft offering documents for people who are buying real estate. We've also shifted into doing business offerings just because the real estate market contracted with the commercial interest rate mortgage hikes happened over the last few years, also slowdowns and things that happened during COVID. So that market has contracted. So we expanded our practice into business offerings. But now we're actually seeing another trend where there's fewer deals to be had in the real estate space. And so it's kind of like a convergence of all the people who want to be able to raise capital are now
Hmm.
converging on these few deals. And they all want to bring a few investors and maybe get a better position. So there's a trend in these real estate offerings to have a tiered system. Hey, if you invest this much, you get this much return. Maybe it's a different split or something, on more favorable terms if you can invest more. So now people want to bring in 4 or 5 investors into these deals. So we're seeing this trend called fund of funds.
Hmm.
And with that, unbeknownst to the people who are the real estate people who are preaching that, comes some additional regulatory hurdles for those fund of fund managers. So we're now seeing that as an opportunity to
Mhm.
provide those additional services to help them be compliant. And so, yes, so there's definitely a change in the market as far as, the evolution of where I started. Everybody was buying a lot of multifamily, then people buying other things besides multifamily, now expanding into business markets, now people wanting to consolidate fundraising and then just use it to invest in certain assets. So we're evolving with that market
Mm.
as we should. And AI, of course, is helping us kind of craft our responses to that market. How are we going to stay relevant in that market? How are we going to continue to serve those clients as their needs change?
I think for a lot of traditional lawyers, there is a trap that if most of their business comes from referral, they don't get that exposure to wider marketplace and trends, and they don't see when there are shifts. But it sounds like because you're doing those events where somebody who's actively looking for information and they're learning and they're exchanging, you have the better exposure to see that, and you can be one step ahead of the industry. Do you think that's the case?
I do think that we have been early embracers of AI, but I think it's becoming a requirement to stay relevant in the entire legal industry, I believe.
Hmm.
Because people are, our clients are expecting quicker responses and maybe, more refined answers. And I think it's important for us as attorneys to stay on top of those trends. But now, AI can help us do that as well. AI, Google search, whatever you want to
Hmm.
use, whatever tools. It's incumbent on us to stay abreast of what's going on in the market and whatever trends there are, um, just because of how quickly everything is evolving at this point in
Hmm.
our lives.
When we were talking earlier as well, you mentioned something about being very selective about the clients that you work with, being, at the point when you get your choice of clients to work with, and you have certain guidelines on what it takes to be a A-list client. Do you want to tell the story of maybe how you arrived to that policy internally and what it looks like today?
Yeah, so even that is evolving over time, but we know which clients get their documents faster, and for them, speed is critical because they may have an offering, a deal under contract that they have to close within 90 days, and we're coming in at some point within that 90-day period, not necessarily at the very beginning, and we need to be able to draft their documents, get them the documents they need so that they can go out and raise the capital and get the bank loan processed all within maybe the last 6 weeks of that time period. So we've got to be able to deliver as quickly as possible. So one of the things that we do is constantly evaluate, who gets their stuff done faster. Well, those that are responsive, those that don't haggle about price, we know what it takes to get this done. We know what you need. Read our emails, look for our communications. Also, there's kind of this, maybe a sense of impatience in the marketplace, right? Where everybody just wants everything done right now and they don't want to wait for anything. And they get sometimes testy with us, but we're all people too. We all have families, we have lives, we don't work 24/7.
Hmm.
We have to be able to manage that workload, but we expect people to be respectful and to read our instructions and follow the instructions, because if they do, then they will get the best experience.
Mm.
That completely want to rewrite the system, don't read our instructions, don't read our fee agreements, don't understand what they're doing, what they're getting, and don't listen to us, they have the worst experience, because it's really hard for us to help somebody who won't even read our emails or respond to our emails for 4 weeks, even though we've continued to try to reach out to them in multiple different ways. So it's a little tougher for us. We have to make sure that this is a regulatory heavy industry, and if you can't follow our directions, then there's probably little chance that you're going to follow the
Right.
securities laws that apply to you or your operating agreement, and which is all going to make you a very risky client. So for us, when we're in that client selection process, we're screening the client as much as they're screening us.
That's interesting. And something that you said earlier as well, the fact that, some clients, they are more time sensitive because they have a deal coming in the next 90 days. I know that a lot of lawyers, they could be frustrated with the clients that want to rush everything. but they, on their own side, from the law firm perspective, they don't offer different commercial tiers for somebody that want to pay for that speed. And it sounds like that's something that you solved, and you're just able to accommodate in a way that commercially works for you as well and makes the client happy.
Yeah, so we've instituted a rush fee. If you need to have your documents done as quickly as humanly possible, we can put you ahead of other clients. We can, ask our staff to work nights and weekends on your stuff, but we would then pass that premium on to the staff. We charge a 20%. Our fees are lump sum, so we'll charge 20% if somebody wants a rush fee. If they wanted a super rush fee, maybe we would charge them 25 or 30.
Mm-hmm.
How quickly can we respond? Of course, we always look at our workload. If we're not overly busy and we can jump on their stuff right away, we're not going to take advantage of them. But
Mm-hmm.
if we are very busy and does require us to rearrange our schedules, or does require the staff to put in extraordinary effort, then we want to reward the staff that does that. And they're very cognizant of that. When we say, hey, this is a rush client, they're very cognizant of making sure that client gets everything they need
Mm-hmm.
as humanly possible. And but again, it all comes back down to the client, is how quickly are they going to respond to us with the information we need. So we always try to educate them on that process. Our intake process is about a 2-hour interview.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, we're explaining to them, what we need from them, gathering the information we need to be able to do the work they need, but also helping educate them on what they're going to be required to do, and how they have to interact with the process.
That's a super important step that's so often overlooked. The fact the interview and you educate your client, you don't expect that the client knows everything. Super applicable to law, and I think to many other knowledge industries as well, because clients as a buyers, they tend to assume, again, back to the context, they assume they know what they need and they want to jump in and they're asking, do this for us. But if you do take those 2 hours, like you said, the intake interview, you can probably spot something that completely changes the way you work with them and changes the advice as well.
Yeah, it gives us an opportunity to spend the time we need to counsel them on the things that they have choices about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not hard to pick a name for your company, but sometimes for some people it is, So if we need to counsel them on that, or, where it should be formed, or, how they should be splitting money with investors, how they should be making sure that they're taking care of their own team, not at the expense of investors, but also making sure that it's equally important that the management team gets compensated, or they end up turning their attention away to other deals so they can support their families. And then this deal could actually suffer. So we try to, help them understand that it's a very fair and balanced approach, and you have to be super cognizant of what are the market trends, what's completely out of the market, and how to present things to your investors. So those are the kinds of things that we can talk to them about on those calls when we take that extra time.
And from the leadership perspective, if you have a client that, let's say, they are happy to pay premium to do things faster because you're also remote, how do you ensure the quality across the team members, that nobody drops the ball when it comes time to going through the intake process and then executing on all the steps that will be involved?
Well, and that's where AI has been a big help to us, because it is easy to sometimes rush through things and overlook things, and we're always aware that we don't want to allow that to happen. So our process is usually two-step. We usually have paralegal draft documents and an attorney review, and then the attorney is the liaison with the client, communicating with them. And then when somebody sends back comments, it's whoever's available, whether it's the attorney, whether it's the paralegal, incorporates those. But with AI, we are, it's actually become easier for us to, even before we send that first set of docs to the client, to say, hey, AI, take a look, let us know if there's anything that we missed that's inconsistent, that, typos, things like that, because when we're at these live events, people come up to us, we've got a securities attorney, they're terrible. It's like, well, what's wrong with them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we need somebody new. It's like, and we hear the same thing every single time. They're
Mm-hmm.
too slow. There's too many mistakes in their documents. They're not responsive. So we try to solve those problems and internally, but also if we can use AI to help us just kind of make those documents more accurate when they go out, speed up the process in any way, maybe incorporating clients' comments when they come back in, making sure that they get incorporated the same way and everything, and then always reviewed by an attorney to make sure that we're not relying on AI to do everything 100%, but we are using it as a tool to maybe get 75% of what we need, and then we do the rest. But also always confirming that whatever it's done is appropriate, is correct. But it can give us just a list. It doesn't go in necessarily and change the documents, but it'll give you a list. Hey, there's a typo here. This is inconsistent with that. Look at those two provisions. And we can go in and correct those things. So we usually do it twice now. So we do it once before we send them the drafts, once before we send them the finals.
Interesting. And probably because you do this exercise, you also see if systematically the same things are coming up, and then you can fix your process so it fixes the problem once and for all.
Absolutely. Yes. And we're all very cognizant of that. So do we start from a base set of templates? Yes. Is it all boilerplate as every client believes? It's just boilerplate. Let's get AI to write that for me. No, it's not. We have very unique provisions in our documents because, I've been doing this since 2008. Our documents have evolved over time based on real experiences of our clients. And there's probably close to 500 clients that I've served throughout my career between this firm and other firms that I've worked for when I've been the lead attorney. We, through that process have changed some of our certain key provisions, and they're unique to us. So it's not necessarily all just boilerplate, but we do usually start from, kind of our internal template and then build from there based on that client's unique set of circumstances. So it's you're absolutely right that when we see something that's a fundamental flaw, or we're hearing the same thing again and again, or a client had some experience where this particular thing was cumbersome, we go back into the original docs and change it and say, hey, everybody from this point on, we're using that.
Gets the new version. Makes sense. You've been doing this since 2008, and you mentioned events, like the industry events that you attend. Throughout the everything up until now, and I don't know if the answer is changing for you right now, but what's been the main driver of the business, the relationship, the clients?
One handy. I've written 2 books. That was a game changer for us. I wrote a book, how to legally raise private money, was the first book I wrote, and it was just kind of a step-by-step how to syndicate real estate. And then I wrote a second version of that that's more encyclopedia-like. That is how to raise capital for real estate legally. And so those 2 books have given us so much credibility that, we meet people at the events. Oh my gosh, I have your books. I've read them both, or we'll give away the books at the events. Just having the books has been a huge boost for us. But also realize if you do write a book, there's a process to getting it to bestseller status. And so you want to work with a publisher that's going to make sure that you do, because, you only have to be a bestseller for one day, but then you always have the claim, it's a bestseller Amazon book. And that's hugely important also, to have 2 Amazon best-selling books, and they continue to sell well, even now. And the first one I wrote in 2019, I published in 2019. The first book took me 9 years. To spit out and get it published. The second book took me 6 months, and then we published that in 2022. And now we've revised those editions as things change. But having those books on Amazon, being able to point people to them, we've sold several thousand copies, which is a lot for books. I mean, there's a lot of books on Amazon that don't sell anything or just sell, a couple hundred copies. Having those books and then having them as a lead magnet on our website. So we have a free book tab on our website where people can go, they can click a link, they can instantly download a version of it, and then we invite them to go and buy it as well if they'd like to have a version on their desk. And just having those available has been a big game changer for us. And so it just, going to the events is one thing. Having the books just solidifies and kind of reinforces for that person, I picked the right attorney. They've written a book on it.
As a marketer, that makes me very, very happy, because so often in the conversation, when the question comes up, why should we pick you as our lawyer? A very standard set of answers comes out. Oh, we are great. We are responsive. We've been doing this for a while. but how would the client know? And if you published a body of work, a book, a podcast, YouTube channel, then
Yes.
there is something specific you can point to, and they can see, well, here it is, and they become familiar with your work. Some of the client relationships you had because of the book, is a different dynamic compared to if somebody meets you on a conference without having gone through the process of reading your material?
For us, the game changer is whether or not they've been through somebody's training program on how to buy the
Mm.
real estate. Because the biggest gap with clients coming to us is that they don't know how to underwrite the deals. And that's typically what they would learn from somebody who's training them how to buy a specific asset class, like multifamily, self storage, something like that. Or just general commercial real estate. And there's some, services out there that we can point them to where people can underwrite the deals for them, or they can, subscribe to some software, learn how to underwrite themselves. But that's a key component. And especially as the market shifts away from, everybody finding their own deals to everybody investing in a few deals and this sort of fund of funds model, there's kind of a fallacy in the market that, hey, we can just invest in somebody else's deal. We don't need to know how to underwrite. And that's
Mm.
wrong, because you actually have a bigger burden, because now, you're packaging somebody else's deal. You're not in charge of that deal. You're assuming they know what they're doing, but what if they don't? And what happens if that deal goes wrong? Who do the investors point their fingers at? Well, you're the man in the middle. You're the first one, and they may point their fingers at them second, but they may or may not have a cause of action against those particular investors, and it may all stop with you. So it's, I guess from a general legal perspective, it's just making sure that the fundamentals are there. And if there's some kind of a gap, then, trying to help educate potential clients on how critical that is to their doing these deals and being able to move forward with their offerings.
Education piece certainly fixes a lot of problem before the issue arises. What does the book distribution look like today? So obviously you have the lead magnet on your website, and you mentioned that you give it away on the events that you attend. Outside of that, how do people usually find you and your work online?
So we do a lot of LinkedIn marketing, and we have our own newsletter, our drip systems. We cross market for other people. I speak on podcasts. We speak at others' events. We have booths at other people's events. So we're trying to market out to all these different channels, and just trying to funnel it all in primarily to our website, because at our website, most things can be accomplished. They can schedule a free call with our business development director, or they can pick an attorney and schedule a paid consult, and we can kind of say, if you want to talk about this, pick this attorney, and kind of help them choose which one's the right attorney for them to talk to. So, or they can download the book, or they can read, the hundreds of articles that are there, or we do have a podcast. They can go and access hundreds of podcasts episodes that we've recorded, or go to YouTube. So we try to funnel everybody into our website, and from there, the ideal thing for us is to get them to schedule a call. And if they schedule with the business development director, and then she can usually, tell them what we provide, whether we're able to help them, and how much it would cost. And then from there, we can assign them to an attorney and just get the whole ball rolling. But if they prefer to talk to an attorney up front, they can go directly to an attorney and speak to them. So that's for us, is driving people to the website is the biggest thing for us, and letting them see all the resources available to them that we've built up over the years, and starting the relationship.
It sounds like you created the ecosystem of the things they could interact with, and ultimately you want them to have a conversation on the phone with your business development director or with one of your colleagues. But there is evidence, again, there is a book, there is a lead magnet, there are things on their website that they can find. How did you approach building that strategy? And the reason why I ask is because so many law firms, they would have a partner who is sort of gets the responsibility of thinking about the marketing. And because it's not their day job, they still need to do their billable hours. They still have other work. What tends to happen is random acts of marketing, where they might try a strategy or try working with an agency for just one channel. And often they would be disappointed because that one channel will not solve everything that has to happen.
Yes.
And you build the system. So do you want to tell about how you arrived to that system?
Sure. So we have a marketing director. We tried different segmented systems for a while. We had one person doing our newsletter. We had somebody else doing this. We even tried to hire a company in India to do some marketing for us. That was a miserable failure. And it was not anything wrong with that company. It's just it was an ill fit. They
Mm.
were used to doing things for a certain market segment. We were a different market segment. They didn't understand our market. And we spent more time trying to supervise them and trying to get them to understand how we did things and what we needed than it took for us just to do it ourselves. So we got back, came back to doing things in house again. Yeah, so we've got a marketing director, and she, works with the person now. So she's kind of over the person that's doing the newsletter. She coordinates with her what we need to talk about, what are our new articles. She has an assistant, and they're the ones that kind of keep the balls rolling. They're in direct contact with the business development director, and also then we have a law firm admin. So all of our people are contractors. We don't have any W-2 employees, and they all do other things as well as work for our firm. But we do have a lot of people that have stayed very long term. Paralegal has been with me for 15 years. One of our attorneys has been with us for 9 years, and they've kind of grown along with the firm. But yeah, so I think that's really how we've done it, is just kind of hire the right people that have the right talent to be able to keep those balls rolling.
Hmm.
I discovered not too long ago that I am, of course, the chief bottleneck, and began to step back from that and let them go. If it comes to
Mm.
writing a check, then they've got to talk to me about it. If it's something they can do on their own, then go do it.
Mm.
And giving them that autonomy has been hugely impactful. They're actually feeling empowered. They're feeling energized. They're feeling excited. Someone who had said, "Oh, I'm kind of going to go step back, do my own thing." And then I said, "Well, hey, do you want to take on this role instead? And I'll get out of your way." They're like, "Okay, yeah, I would love to step back into that role." So sometimes recognizing that, the founding attorney isn't the best person to be directing the marketing efforts, as you pointed out. And,
Mm.
maybe I need to step back and do the things I'm good at, which, and the things I really, really want to do is I want to write, teach, and and troubleshoot the hard problems, not the problem clients so much, because we try to screen them out before they get to us, but the people that have the more advanced strategies that they want to implement, or the long term clients that really want to just be able to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Kim, can you answer this question for me?" And no, they're not going to get a bill for it.
Mhm.
That's the kind of people.
An interesting thing, and I don't want to assume, but a bit of a pattern recognition because I've seen that in the similar companies. The advantage of having contractors over employee is because oftentimes contractors are better in reporting on KPIs, whereas sometimes team members, that line can get blurred over a certain period of time. And it sounds like by giving them more freedom to just execute and be excited about building something, you're doing the best for the firm and also for them in terms of their own career. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that's true. We've recently made this transition, so I think everyone is learning what their role is and how to step into that role. But yes,
Mm.
up until that point, they were expecting me to say, "Hey, what are these KPIs? Oh, will you generate that report?" Versus just, "Hey, monthly we have to report to the founding
Mhm.
attorney on what all these are." So I'm responsible for collecting that information. So it's actually easier for me to do that if I'm one step removed and they are reporting back to me, because then they become accountable to each other.
And that's how you build a business that can run without you. That's the
Yeah.
dream.
Yes.
From your experience, because you mentioned the agency that wasn't a good fit for a number of factors, and also your marketing director right now, sounds like doing a fantastic job. Having gone through that experience, what are the qualities that you look for in a great marketing partner, whether it's in-house or somebody external?
I need somebody who can kind of look at the big picture. And, because these are a lot of balls to keep juggling in the air. Like we were talking about, we have the book, we have podcasts, we have the website, we have our YouTube channel, and some things we've done well at, some things we haven't done as well at as we should have. I think that we're in the process of kind of revamping how we do our YouTube videos. right?
Hmm.
Because we can look at a competitor that has 4,000 followers and we've been doing this for, 7 years and we don't have that level of followers. So we want to say, okay, what are they doing differently than we are that we could do, ourselves and maybe serve our audience better? And so I think we're looking for a marketing firm that can constantly reevaluate, not just set up drip systems once and let them run for 2 years, but constantly,
Hmm.
reviewing, keeping up with trends and helping us figure out what needs to be done that we don't even know needs to be done. How do we better market our YouTube? Is there a better way to be marketing our books? Is there a better way to be doing some of the things we've been doing for a long time, and I've been making it all kind of work together. So that's what we look for in a marketing firm, is somebody who can take on that marketing direction role, and either they can work with the existing team that we have, or they can provide people that can fill those gaps where we don't have those things being done as well as perhaps we should be.
I think that proactive element is super important now more than ever because, again, with the disruption coming from AI also in marketing and advertising, when something used to take 2, 3 years to change in terms of the best practices a decade ago, now they're changing every week. So
Oh yeah.
you probably want people who are on top of that and they can bring those ideas to you instead of waiting for a request to change something.
Well, and not waiting for us to say, oh, hey, the new buzzword is AEO, not SEO, right?
Right.
And we need somebody who's coming to us saying, hey, did you guys know nobody's doing that anymore? We're all doing this, and and it comes down to just figuring out how to write our articles differently.
Mm.
So, although I will say that there's a limit to AI on that as well, because the human element cannot be replaced. And I've been writing articles for a very long time. When everybody told me I had to do 3,500 word articles, I said, no, I'm going to write 2-page articles that people actually read. Because I don't care. I mean, I do care about getting the website hits, but I more care about educating the people, and I'm going to stay on that mission. And
Mm.
so I did. I wrote 2-page articles, and I can't tell you how many times I had somebody come on a call and say, I've read every one of those articles on your website, because they were short and they were succinct and they were very plain English, explaining different aspects of the law. And when we've tried to say to AI, hey, rewrite this for SEO, AEO,
Hmm.
it all of a sudden comes back with like this big long, and I actually had to pull
Right.
stuff back. I said, I think we gave the wrong instructions to our AI prompt, because it took an article that I had written that was very much checklist and very useful and
Hmm.
really what I needed my clients to see, and it made it into this really long and boring thing that
Mm.
even I didn't want to read.
Right.
I said, okay, that's not doing what I needed to do, and I don't think it's serving anybody, because I don't think anybody's actually reading it or getting anything out of it. And maybe it's getting us some additional hits on our website, but what's our true objective here? It's not just to get people visiting our website and then bouncing off because they can't find what they want. It's getting them there and getting them to read it because it actually makes sense in their learning. So, I think we have to be careful about that.
Certainly. I think knowing the right metrics as well, like you said earlier with the clients, asking the right question with the AI is something to keep in mind. And same goes to marketing metrics, because there are some firms that publish videos that get to 100 views and they get a client from every one of those. And then there are somebody else that produces a video that gets potentially 1 million views, but then it's a good entertainment, but no work comes from it. So what exactly is the right thing to optimize for? That's important to keep in mind. Kim, for somebody that wants to learn more about you and your work, where can they find you online?
Syndicationattorneys.com. So that's the best place to find out all about us and learn what we do, and keep an eye on it because it's ever changing. We're in the process of changing the homepage on our website right now, just because of some of these recent trends that we're, embracing.
Staying ahead of the curve.
Yes, very much so. And yeah, it does feel very much like a race. It feels like we're all, trying to get on the plane before it takes off. And in some cases, trying to catch the plane as it's already in the air.
Right.
But we're doing our best, and I think all attorneys need to be thinking that way if you want to stay relevant and stay up with what your clients are thinking, and give them the best possible advice. You do need to be challenging your own assumptions and researching things a little differently than you have in the past.
Certainly. think that's a good advice. Kim, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.